name is Hannah Fox. I'm the co-artistic director of a new cultural event for Melbourne called Rising, and we're presenting Patricia Piccinini's exhibition, A Miracle Constantly Repeated, in the ballroom and some of the surrounding spaces of Flinders Street Station. Before we get into it today, I would just like to, on behalf of Rising and our co-hosts ACMI and Patricia, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we have the great privilege of living and working on, the Wurundjeri of the Woiwurrung of the Kulin Nation. And I'd like to pay my deepest respects to their elders and future leaders and any First Nations people who are here with us today. And we'd love to know where you're beaming in from today, so please share the country that you're situated on in the chat if you'd like to. I was delighted to be asked to be hosting this ACMI and Rising Q&A webinar, where we'll get to hear directly from one of Australia's most celebrated artists, Patricia Piccinini, about some of the ideas that she's exploring within this exhibition, and also hopefully gain some insight into her artistic practice too. But to give you a little bit of background, Patricia has spent close to 3 decades exploring the nature of humanity and exposing unseen sides of our relationship to the natural world through her work. Throughout the course of her career, she's represented Australia at the Venice Biennale. She's exhibited at major institutions all over the world and all over the country. And this current exhibition, A Miracle Constantly Repeated, is her first extensive hometown show in close to 20 years. So it's been a huge honour for us at Rising to witness this show evolving in the 3rd floor of the Flinders Street Station, which is an unusual space. It's a space suspended above street level, and having been closed to the public for 35 odd years, it feels kind of frozen in time. Due to the success of the show, we've been able to extend the season right through till June 2022, which has given all of us the really rare luxury of time to spend with some of the ideas that Patricia is working with, these ideas of resilience and care that permeate all of the works in the show in some way. But I'm going to let Patricia tell you all about that. So we'll begin this session shortly, and Patricia's going to take us through a presentation where she'll talk through some of the thinking behind the works. But just before we get into that, after the presentation, we'll go into a Q&A, so you can ask any of your questions that you might have. If you're thinking of questions while Patricia is talking, you can pop them into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, which is separate to the chat box, and that'll be great, and we can ask them afterwards. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand over to you, Patricia.
Thanks, Hannah. And I'd just like to welcome everyone here today. What I thought I would do is present a brief talk about my works, about 12 minutes, and then we can go straight on to questions. The title of the exhibition is a quote from a 19th century theologian named Nyman Abbott. It was his attempt to explain evolution without abandoning spirituality. So what he was trying to do was trying to promote the ideas of Charles Darwin, this idea of evolution, to a community of people that were really steeped in religious thought. So that's why he used the idea of the miracle, so that he could bring these two ideas together. Because what was happening was that their relationship to nature had fundamentally changed because of this scientific knowledge, new knowledge. And in a way, I think that that's where we are today as well. Like, we are thinking or rethinking around our relationship with nature and what that means to us because of the climate crisis. But I also think that the image of a miracle constantly repeated. It's a wonderful way to think about life. Nature, the world, our lives are this amazing, paradoxical juxtaposition of the extraordinary and the everyday. It is the miracle of a dandelion pushing its way through a crack in the pavement. It's the way that, because it happens every day, it's easy to lose sight of how fortunate we are to see the sunrise. And we are lucky enough to live within this constantly repeated miracle. And we can't afford to ignore it, because maybe bits of it or all of it could just slide away. Now, I've been exploring these ideas around the relationship between the artificial and the natural from a variety of angles for more than 20 years. And this exhibition builds on that, focusing on the central relationship between people and the environment around them. And this is not an academic question. I actually do want to talk about how we as people, as citizens, can come to terms with the very real and urgent challenges of our time. I started thinking about this show during the horrific bushfires of early 2020 and created the majority of this show against the background of COVID. I wanted to make an exhibition that acknowledges the crisis, but also celebrates resistance. The exhibition begins with the diorama, and that is an artificial recreation of a natural space filled with unnatural creatures that look real. Plus, there's some natural ones in there just to mix it all up. And it's a kind of nod to history, and it's a great way into the building and acknowledging that this is a historic building, and this is the way we've understood nature in the past, and these are the kinds of knowledges and where we store these knowledges in museums. So fixing our relationship with nature matters, and we need more than the fear of the consequences of inaction to achieve that. We need possibility and hope. And this idea is seen in the film I made for the exhibition, which is called We Walk Together. In this work, we follow a relationship between a young woman and a transgenic creature who travel together through an Anthropocene landscape. There's a narrative of reciprocal care, where connection ultimately leads to rebirth and hope. The exhibition celebrates the way that communities, people, nature, ecosystems can come back from the difficulty and trauma, whether that is around the pandemic or climate change. The work is rooted in what I like to call speculative optimism, which is envisaging positive futures as a means to moving towards them. You know, if you can't see it, you kind of can't be it. This does not show us how the world is, but as it could be. You can see in this work, The Rescuers, that it celebrates those rare and real moments when humans work together to help the creatures around them. This work reminds us that we can do something and that our actions matter. A question I often ask with my work is, how can we find a new way to imagine the relationship between people and nature? How can we arrive at a new understanding of nature that is progressive and positive for all species on Earth, including humans, but not just for humans? Sapling is a work that looks at this idea, presenting us with the relationship between a human and a hybrid creature that dissolves the boundaries between the plant and the animal kingdom. So this is the work here with the father holding up the plant boy. So this plant chimera, and a chimera is a creature that's made up of different species, And generally, they're made up of different animals. But in this case, it's a human and a plant. Now, this plant chimera references the growing scientific realization of a kind of plant intelligence, which is nothing like ours, but is still vital to the life of the planet. This way of thinking leads towards a notion of personhood for plants, granting them the sorts of rights already accorded to companies. And this work kind of tries to imagine the kinds of relationships that we might have with plants. It's a kind of conceptual idea of it. So part of how we do this is by looking at how unreal the construction of humans as separate from nature is. So this idea of unnatural specialness is a fairly modern one, and perhaps it's one that's worn out its usefulness. Because genetic research reminds us that we are actually just another animal. That's what Darwin said, and it's still quite challenging, but that is the case. We are unique and wonderful, definitely, but then again, so are many other animals. And it's this idea that was the inspiration for this work, which is called While She Sleeps. And it imagines a sort of human thylacine, which is the Tasmanian tiger, a human thylacine hybrid. In this work, we see a recurring theme in my work, which emphasizes the universality of care and the close genetic relationships that all animals have. Birth, rebirth, and renewal are also key themes that the exhibition explores. I often return to the unstoppable vitality of the organic. Now, I just love the idea that just like life lives, like it's like the green shoots that appear after a bushfire, or the potential inherent in just every new life, regardless of what it is. The Awakening is a video work that is my attempt to represent birth in all its crazy, visceral glory. To me, birth is one of those everyday miracles. Amazing when you think about it. I mean, it's just actually amazing that anything gets born, but also kind of so ubiquitous that we rarely stop to think about it. I mean, it happens all the time. It is also our ultimate commonality, because we are all born and we're all lucky to be here at the same time. The ecosystem of the building itself is a wonderful reminder of this idea of rebirth. The exhibition brings new life to this forgotten space in the way that it highlights the space's specialness, transforming it without destroying it. So it's always there. Like, I haven't tried to cover it up. I haven't painted it over, not that I could, but it's always visible. And often it's part of the work as well. The exhibition overlays the strange and the imaginary on the historical reality of the building. So the viewer moves between the real and the imaginary, allowing the artificial and the natural to merge and connect rather than separate. And the special thing about the railway station is that you're walking along the corridor and you're seeing the people get the trains, and then you go into one room and you see something extraordinary, and then you come out and you're back into the real world where people are going to work, and then you're into another space. And so it's kind of, you're always weaving in and out, and things kind of blend together. And we see inconceivable objects in actual spaces, and somehow they make sense together. This installation, Celestial Field, exemplifies this, both conceptually and practically. It is literally a field of hybrid flowers that sprout from the floor and dangle from the ceilings of the old gymnasium. This intervention completely transforms the space, but it doesn't erase it. It floats inside it, and we experience it as a hybrid of the new and the old. Much of my work is about making connections between ideas, but also emotional connections between the viewer and the works. I really do hope that there is a space for everyone in this exhibition. The work springs from the basic assumption that all life, all bodies, all beings are beautiful and valuable. And that is a core idea in all of my work. And you can see it in the supporter, which is a new sculpture that I created for this exhibition. It's a work which shows a human figure working to support a strange ecosystem of creatures using only their body. In this work, I've tried to make a figure whose gender is ambiguous. I think of the support as a they because what they are is less important than what they do. Unlike the mythical Atlas, who was cursed to always have to carry the world on his shoulders, the supporter chooses to do so, and that makes all the difference. For the viewer, the challenge, or perhaps the opportunity, is to discover that the beauty beneath the strangeness of creatures that we might be unfamiliar with. And this is a key dynamic in my work. And that is the viewer's journey from the disquiet, from a kind of disquiet, unsettledness to warmth, from aversion to care. And I feel like there's very few opportunities to do this in life. Often we're told this is good and this is bad, and there's no chance to go between or move from one to the other or have this journey of change. Viewers often feel this with the couple. At first, we see them as simply a couple in a loving embrace. But as we look more closely at their feet and face, we see their distinctive strangeness. However, the strangeness is not what we take away from the work. What we're left with is a connection to the depiction of care, of their care for each other. So we connect to what we see, this tenderness. Tenderness is also something we rarely see depicted in the world. And care is at the heart of this exhibition. There's a narrative of reciprocal care between us and the environment and the animals around us. Care has always been a vital but undervalued principle in our lives. And we will see care represented and celebrated throughout the works in the exhibition. Care is what we are presented with in a work like No Fear of Deaths, where we see a chimera of a human and an Australian humpback dolphin. And so this mother figure, this chimera, is cradling a girl child. There is so much strangeness here, but there's no fear. There's also my own care about the viewer's experience, that they are engaged and inspired rather than frightened, even if they may be challenged by the strangeness of the chimeras. I've tried to create spaces that are uplifting and joyful, that celebrate the wonder of the world around us, and also our embodied experience in the space. And that is very much what we get in the ballroom. It's an explosion of color and light and sound and reflection of mirrors. At its heart is the mirrored neon-lit mother tree surrounded by the flower-like glass breath blooms. They're the glass pieces on the roots of the tree there. And welcoming us in is this sort of cat sneaker hybrid. So this hybrid here that I call La Brava is a hybrid between a human, a cat, and a sandshoe. So we've got La Brava, and there's also the mother figure of the Bond, who stands on the balcony at the back there, watching over, and she's watching over the ring of glass mushrooms that represent rebirth and regeneration. It's definitely a somewhat surreal space, but it is my opportunity to let loose after the constraints and the sadness of the last couple of years. It's no accident that the exhibition culminates in the ballroom, which is an unselfconsciously celebratory experience. I mean, the music just makes you want to move around. And I hope that this will fill the viewer with the energy to go back out into the world and make change happen.
Thank you so much, Patricia. That was amazing. I've heard you talk about your work a few times now, but every time I learn something new, and I find it, I guess, particularly inspiring that you are able to articulate this kind of precise intersection of ideas that you're exploring with such clarity, but you also leave a lot of space for the viewer or the listener to bring their own experience and interpretation to the table. And as a curator, that's what I aspire to. And you are just a living example of how to do it with grace and generosity. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Hannah.
We're going to open up to some questions. I'm just having a look at what's there. So I might just start with this one. You cover off so many different styles, techniques, making art forms in this exhibition. And I know there's a lot of students watching this webinar who would be keen to learn more about your studio practice, like what your actual working methods are. Are you able to talk to any of the process of making some of these pieces?
Yeah, so obviously, or maybe not obviously, like this whole exhibition is made by a team of people because there are so many different processes in it, and I'm not an expert in all of them. And so I work with people that are really versed in each discipline. So, for example, there's a lot of glass in the show, and I did a residency at the Canberra Glass Workshop, but I'm not a master blower, but I did end up being able to work with a master blower who did blow the glass, and she, Nettie Blair, her name is, and she's got, you know, decades of experience, and she brings that to the work. But she has her own practice, and she works on my work for this show. So that's often what happens, like with the film as well. I have the idea for the film, but I work with a whole team of people, including a director, because to be a director, you need a lot of years of skills. So I work with somebody who has that skill. And that's why the film is so engaging. And an actor who's really great at what she does. So they're the things that I do outside of my studio. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I can't do, like a lot of fiberglass. But the majority of the stuff that happens in the studio is the silicon work. And that is something that my studio, excuse me, that is very skilled in. And it has taken us about, 15 years to develop the processes around it. And it's an everyday thing. And there's about 6 people in my studio who who work on this all the time. And I'm always there, and I understand the processes, but I don't do the physical work myself. For example, each head of hair, no, it takes about 3 weeks to punch in.
Wow.
Like it's 3 weeks,
Wow.
9 to 5. It's a lot of time. So that's something that, and also it takes about 10 years to learn how to do it properly. So I can't do this. I have to work with other people. And so my role and my process is this. I see myself as a kind of a person in the world, an everyday type person in the world. And I want to have a conversation with other people about stuff that's really important. And right now, I think what's really important is our relationship to nature, because we're at a kind of a crisis point. In the past, I've been more interested in bodies, but now there seems to everyone, and I am very interested in the future of our natural world. And so I spend a lot of time thinking and listening to people, and then coming up with artworks. And they could be balloons, hot air balloons, or they could be little small things that are made of Britannia metal, or they could be silicon works that could be big, or they could be a video. It could be a drawing. I could exhibit a drawing. And so when I come up with this idea, I think, oh, what's the best way to make it? And I do lots of drawings, and then I work with the right people to bring these ideas to fruition. Yeah. So I understand all the processes, but I'm definitely not an expert in it. But it's all coming from my world. And that's why the exhibition is so kind of, there's so many links around it. Like they're all kind of linked together, and things come up and down. Yeah.
Yeah, there's that cohesive story. I've got
I mean, and this is a kind of a different idea of what the artist might be. Like a traditional one might be, oh, you make everything yourself. And that certainly was when I went to art school 30 years ago, that was the predominant idea. And it has been challenging to move away from that myself.
Yeah, can it sometimes give you a bit of imposter syndrome? Do you feel like you have to justify not necessarily making every single bit?
Yeah, I was originally fairly defensive about it, because I thought that people might undervalue what I was doing, because it wasn't made with every little bit wasn't made with my own hands. And a lot of art gets its value from saying, oh, I made this, it comes from my body, like Michelangelo, like God went through his head and into his arm, and he could see what was in the, in the stone, and this is why it's so special. Yeah, I don't subscribe to that traditional idea of the artist. It doesn't. I don't want the work to be limited by my own capacities, because what I really value is being able to connect with people and create meaning together with other people. And that's another way that I think I differ from the traditional idea of the artist, is that the meaning doesn't reside solely in my intentions, or in fact only in the work. It resides in a kind of triangle between the viewer, the work, and me, and together we all make meaning, and this meaning becomes the fabric of our society, and this culture is what gives us strength to thrive and do good in the world. Yeah, I also believe in doing good in the world as well. That's something. Yeah, that's something that I'm very interested in, especially when so many species are dying out. I sort of think, there has to be, kind of some, I don't know, some social conscience. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And I think those are the things that shared meaning are the things that are remembered, well into the future. And when you look back at history, that culture is what we really reference more than anything else.
Yeah.
There's a question that's coming from the audience, just asking if you could talk a little bit more about the relationship between science and art. Maybe you could talk about that from a research perspective.
Yeah. Well, I'm very inspired by science, and I understand the altruism of scientists. Like, scientists do actually want to make the world a better place. And I also look forward to what science can bring us. Like, I'm very grateful that we have a vaccine. And I'm waiting for cures for genetic diseases that a technology like CRISPR can bring to us, for example. But at the same time, I'm not an apologist for science. Like, I'm not trying to say, oh, well, science is going to save us from everything, and it's the only way forward. Because sometimes I think that some of the technological solutions to some of our problems are made more desirable to us if we think they come from a science background, because they've got this sort of tinge of technology around them, when often the way forward is actually very simple, and it's more around kind of more ethical ideas around just respect for other kinds of intelligences. But having said that, it's often science that informs us of this, that plants. We know that plants can communicate. We know this through science. So, yeah, it's a very complex relationship. I mean, most of my reading is around science because I love science. I love the knowledge that science brings us and the possibilities. But I'm also kind of wary of how science could be used and how sort of homogenized. So, for example, if there's a cure for something, then we all have to have it, and we all have to be the same. And then sometimes, that we may not need cures for certain things. Like we might not need to cure conditions that are not pathological, for example, that are just kind of aesthetic.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely become the topic of the day for us right now.
Yeah.
Or not in science. From Susan, we've got, how important is film and video in your art and communicating with your audience and how you share ideas?
Oh, it's vitally important that I connect with the audience. And the reason why I went out of my way to make a new video film for your show, Hannah, as part of Rising, is because that's how we engage with the world more and more these days. And yeah, I just wanted to be part of the world we live in and not something out of time, anachronistic. Like, I do make a lot of sculpture, and sometimes that feels sort of old-fashioned. And so I try to use the medium of the age. And so making a film is the medium of the age. People have got a really special connection to it. They can really understand it in a way that they don't understand maybe even sculpture. And they understand it because they see it every day. And so it's a great way to connect with people around that story about how this artificial creature opens the world for this natural girl, and together they see the world in a different way, and then eventually she has to do what humans are really bad at, and that is give away something that they love. So she really loves this creature, but she has to do the right thing by the creature and see the creature through his eyes. And what the creature needs is its own environment. but that environment is a natural environment and it's an artificial creature. So it's a very complex work, even though it's very beautiful to look at.
Yeah, I guess film just gives you that opportunity to tell those complex and layered stories in a way that perhaps
Yeah,
static or even text can't.
exactly.
Mm.
And even a sculpture can't do it because it's set in this space that I can't bring into the gallery. Yeah.
Mm. Although I would never describe anything that you do as old-fashioned, it's the opposite.
Right.
We got a great question from Bridget who says, have you been able to observe audiences in the exhibition? And if so, did people react as you imagined, or did some reactions or moments or the way people have engaged with it surprise you?
These are all great questions, by the way. Thank you, guys. Well, because I can wear a mask, no one knows me, and they don't know me anyway. And so I do slink around the gallery quite often, watching people's responses. And I quite like it, because sometimes I do actually physically witness that almost bodily response to kind of going, that's too much, especially the video of the birth. It's like, and then it's like, oh no, there's something kind of pleasurable about that. There's something kind of, it's a kind of a release to see this egg, eye, baby, something, whatever it is, kind of plop out. And we see it mirrored in the actual video where it gives birth, and then there's sort of this wry smile. It's like, and I love seeing people oscillate between the kind of and I love it. I do see it a lot. The other thing I love seeing is people dancing around the ballroom to the music. That is really gratifying because Jess Green did the music and she just did a perfect job. I said, just make music that sounds like, that says, come to my party. But, I don't really care if you come, but come to my, sort of like this nonchalant kind of, I don't really care, but it's really cool kind of music. And it kind of does that. And it swells around the room, and it kind of takes you with it. And I love seeing people dance to it.
It's such timeless music. I love it. We've got not that much longer, but I've got another question for you I'd love to squeeze in because it's another great one from Vincent, who asks if you see your work as a kind of activism.
Yes, I do. This is a great question. Yeah, I absolutely do. And sometimes I think, am I doing enough? And part of it is I do feel that trying to talk about this changing relationship with nature is almost the most important thing we can do. And I'm not a philosopher. I'm not a politician. I'm not somebody with a lot of money, but I am a cultural thinker. I'm a cultural participant. And I feel that my forte, my strength is to be able to connect with people on a kind of on another level around things. I make these. I'm not even a writer. I'm a person that can make these experiences that people can connect to, and then enrich people's lives, and can kind of fortify them to act as around these ideas. And these ideas are held up by a kind of positive force, a kind of optimism, because a lot of the time, well, mostly, I feel quite despondent about how things are, and disappointed by how our world leaders have managed and brought us to this stage. And I see the future with young people. They're going to fight this fight. I mean, it's a big responsibility. It's really unfair. But I just feel that, things have to change, and I want to be part of that change. And this is my part, sort of starting this conversation on a level that's not literal, that's not shaming, that's open-ended, that's optimistic, and that can be part of this journey.
Yeah, I think that point about not shaming is so important. That's such an inactive kind of emotion to experience, and that seems like a really perfect place to stop. We haven't got much time left, so I just wanted to say thank you really to everyone for joining us today, and to you, Patricia, for taking the time to just share these ideas and your experience with us. So thanks to everyone for joining ACMI and Rising and Patricia Piccinini today. I know when you get to experience the exhibition, you're going to be absolutely astounded and inspired by seeing a miracle constantly repeated. And just a reminder that the season's extended till the 12th of June 2022. So you'll see us there slinking around in masks and baseball caps, watching how you soak it in. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Hannah.